Our first speaker will be Irina Marin. She's currently affiliated with the Wiener Wiesenthal Institut for Holocaust-Studies and is working on a project about the circulation of news, rumors and violence between the Tsarist Russia, Romania and Austria-Hungary, and the interconnection between the Jewish question and the peasant question in Eastern Europe. Her previous research focused on the loyalties and the sense of identity of Romanian generals in the Austro-Hungarian army. She wrote a brief history of the dediščina and has an upcoming book with Belgrade Macmillan based on her current research and with the title Peasant Violence and Anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe. She will be talking today about the rural social combustibility along the complex frontier between Austria-Hungary, Tsarist Russia, and the Fledgling Balkan States in the last decades of the long 19th century. Irina, your 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Rob, for the presentation. And also thank you, Marco, and all the organizers of this wonderful conference for inviting me. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to be here. The presentation today that I'm going to give is actually the blueprint of an article I'm submitting to Rural History. Before I actually start talking about rural combustibility along the complex frontier between Austria-Hungary, Tsarist Russia, and Fledgling Balkan States, I would like to set this research into the broader context of my postdoctoral project. So this presentation today is part and parcel of a postdoctoral project funded by the Dediščina Trust in the UK called Fear Across Borders, Peasant Violence and Anti-Semitism Around the Frontier. It is a more limited triple frontier. It doesn't actually include Bulgaria and Serbia, as my presentation does today. And the basic idea around this project is to follow the triple frontier, and especially the borderlands around it, that is Romania in its entirety, Transylvania and the Austria-Hungary, including Družbena for the Austrian half of the empire, Bessarabia for the Tsarist empire. So what I wanted to do initially was to see how crisis, primarily rural crisis, on one side of the border reverberated, rippled through the frontier in the neighbouring borderlands. That was the basic starting point of my PhD. And actually, if you think of the region and also the time span, 1889 to 14, there is a lot of unrest in the area. So if you only think of the 1905 Russian Revolution and the peasant unrest in the Tsarist Empire, but also the Kishinev pogroms, several waves of Romanian peasant uprising, Hungarian rural strikes, for instance, the Pochomkinists defecting and ending up in Romania. So that there is a wealth of peasant unrest and peasant-related unrest in the region. So I had to actually make a methodological choice of narrowing it down to something a bit more manageable. What I opted in the end for was to concentrate on a big episode of unrest in one of the countries, and that was the Great Romanian Peasant Uprising of spring 1907, and follow its ripples across this frontier. Just a quick sort of interactive map as to how this uprising actually unfolded. In January 1907, the map of the country looked like this. Blue denotes relative calm, or at least reported calm, so I'm relying on archival documents. Pink already means sort of verbal complaints. By February, the whole country was in ferment, whereas the northern part was in open rebellion. Red means open violence, that is arson, killing, destruction of property. By March, the whole country was in open rebellion. So I'm using this big crisis in one of the borderlands in order to test the frontier and how news circulated across this border. So I'm asking, how did the authorities across the border, the various levels of authorities, the lower local authorities, and sort of the high echelons of officialdom react to news of impending contamination or possible contamination? Also, what I'm asking, and this ties into today's presentation, is why was it that of all these borderlands, it was Romania that was so combustible, so explosive? Not Tsarist Russia, not the Austro-Hungarian borderlands, and as I am developing in today's paper, also there is not very much present unrest happening in Serbia and Bulgaria. What I'm talking about is not isolated flares of peasant unrest, because there were such all around this borderland. What I'm talking about is this large-scale peasant explosion that happened in Romania, but not in any of the neighbouring borderlands. And I'm asking these questions in the context of structural, at least apparent structural similarities. If you look all around this frontier, you will see small peasant properties or landless peasants. They all pursue a very sort of underdeveloped type of agriculture. Fertilizers are non-existent. They use the two field rotation system, so sort of medieval thing. Illiteracy is rampant all around the frontier. There's chronic peasant indebtedness, and so on and so forth. So, why is it that only in Romania peasant poverty waxes explosive, but not in the other borderlands? So that's roughly the way I frame my questions. Now, quick sort of information, a note on Romania. So, in 1907, what we have in this country is rapid modernization, massive imports, institutional imports mainly, fast but lopsided development, so it's only a very thin social stratum that is yanked into the 20th century, while 80% of the population remains illiterate, for the most part, and very poor. For the most part, the population was Romanian and Orthodox, so no major sort of sources of ethnic conflict. There was massive investment in state infrastructure, and agriculture remained, for a long time, the main branch of the Romanian economy. The peculiarity of the Romanian system was that actually land tenure was dominated by the great property, the large property, latifundia, went hand in hand with absentee landlordism, because especially after independence, many of the great landowners went into politics, so they subrented their estates to big capitalist entrepreneurs, the leaseholders or the arrendash. The uprising is usually explained in terms of, first of all, as you can see here, a great polarization of land tenure. So on the one hand, you have most of the land, or a great proportion of the land, concentrated in the hands of a few thousand great landowners, and then the rest of the population has very little land, usually below 5 hectares, or they're landless. The system was described by Dr. as a neo-servile system, a system of neo-serfdom. He talks about the 1864 peasant uprising, the 1864, land reform that he considers to be the main culprit for the peasant peasant uprising, because what it did, it only replaced the legal ties of bondage with economic ties of bondage. So what the great Romanian landowners did was to make sure that the peasants never had enough land to be able to make ends meet, that they would always have to fall back on renting extra land from the great landowners. Now, because the great estates were leased out, this system of bidding and outbidding came into being, whereby the leaseholders offered higher and higher rents to the landlords, and they then farmed out all the costs to the peasants. So all of the costs were transferred onto the peasants. So mainly, historiography on the topic concentrates on this notion that it was the latifundia plus the cancerous leasehold system that really did it for Romania in 1907. Now, this is where the cross-border comparison comes in handy and shows a completely different picture from what usually Romanian historiography presents of the uprising. Now, if we look at the latifundia boundary within this borderland, it actually runs south of Romania. So we find big property, which also lends itself to leaseholding in Romania, in Tsarist Russia, in parts of Hungary, especially central Hungary, but not in Serbia, not in Bulgaria. So if we take the latifundia thesis, then it means that there should be peasant unrest north of this boundary, and there isn't. It's just in Romania. There is no comparative peasant unrest in Tsarist Russia, and even in Hungary, they do have their problems, but they never escalate to such proportion. Now, Serbia, this is a very sort of packed chart. Serbia and Bulgaria, if you can see here, have a very different land tenure structure from Romania. First of all, the great property is very small, and the middle property, sort of average size property, is quite considerable. So you don't actually find a huge polarization that you find in Romania. So it's almost as if they are in a completely different category. Now, the cross-border comparison actually showed, upon sort of focusing in on various factors, showed quite striking dissimilarities. So one of the things that I learned by comparing agricultural systems of land tenure was that what lacked in Romania and what was present all around the neighbouring borderlands was access to pasture land and forest for the peasants. So that was a small script in the already mentioned land reform of 1864, when peasants were given a bit of land, but they were not actually given any access to pastures and forests, which meant that they remained in the hands of the great landowners, and they were an element of bribe, of blackmail, basically. Even Tsarist Bessarabia, where if you think of Bessarabia being included in the Tsarist Empire, you would, at least at face value, you would think that it would be the worst off province, because the Russians took a long time to abolish serfdom and so on and so forth. And actually, Bessarabia is quite interesting from this point of view, because it is a Tsarist borderland. It's not a heartland, it's a borderland. So they have a special status. The terms of Bessarabian land reform are very favourable to the peasantry. They received, definitely, they received higher grants of land, but also that there is very clear specification that pasture land and access to forest is to be granted by the great landowners at the expense of the great landowners, so that the peasants don't have to back anything. That has to do with the borderland status of the province. The Tsarist authorities were trying to stabilize the province, so they were trying to play the local elites against the peasants and vice versa. So to them, that dynamics worked in that case. Now, I've also looked at political representation because it appears that where there was political representation of the peasantry, some of the discontent was channeled into more peaceful, sort of political type of protest rather than loose cannon type of revolutionary explosion. And what we find is that Romania and Bessarabia has no such thing. And they don't get political representation after the First World War. But places like Hungary and Bulgaria have quite important peasant representation. In Hungary, you have the Social Democrats that represent both the proletariat, but they soon figure out that they are to count in politics. They need to represent the peasants as well. And Bulgaria has a strong agrarian movement going on. And another set of factors that I considered was what I call the exit possibilities. If things were bad, if peasants were poor, could they go away? Could they escape? And in this way, diffuse the explosive potential of the situation. And in terms of industrial potential and also possibilities for migration, Hungary and Tsarist Russia are the best cases from Hungary. We have an absolute hemorrhage of peasant emigration, and Hungarian authorities are really unhappy about that. In Tsarist Russia, you have these sort of intra-imperial schemes of colonization. So once again, if you're unhappy with your situation, you can always go places. Romania is a very special case. It's the one borderland, as it were, that has absolute minimal emigration quotas. And I'm still trying to figure out what exactly precluded Romanian peasants to actually emigrate en masse. I'm suspecting there must be some sort of either political or legal sort of obstacle to them. But they're the ones that actually don't emigrate at all. Another point of difference in terms of what could possibly cause explosive conditions in these borderlands is the power dynamics in which landed elites were embedded in the various borderlands. And here we see two different fault lines. So we have the imperial borderlands, like the Austro-Hungarian and Tsarist borderland, where the landed elites were in control of the respective provinces, but at the same time there was a higher authority for them to be held responsible by, as it were. So if something went wrong in the Tsarist borderland, there would be the central Tsarist authorities who would ask questions: what's going on? Why are the peasants unhappy? But that was not the case in Romania. Romania was an independent state. It had acquired independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1878, so the big landed elites had no one but themselves to be held accountable to, as it were. In Bulgaria and Serbia, and this is where the Ottoman comparison shows that it's not a very valid one. What happens is that the national independence project is actually tied up with the welfare of the peasantry. So the movement towards independence in Serbia and Bulgaria presupposes the removal of Ottoman landowners, who were the only great landowners at that point in time. That's why you're left with small, dwarf, or average-sized peasantry. Whereas, and that also has to do with the different status of Serbia and Bulgaria within the Ottoman Empire as compared to Romania within the Ottoman Empire. Romania, or the Wiener Wiesenthalities, had actually been autonomous within the Ottoman Empire, which meant that their elites had never been removed. They had endured across time, so they retained all of their landed privileges, and the national project had nothing to do with the removal of those elites. They were the ones who wanted independence, whereas in Serbia and Bulgaria, most of the noble elites had been removed, or at least for a long time before, because they had been fully integrated into the empire. That's another point of difference that I found quite interesting. Now, to wrap up, it appears to me that Romania, on the whole, was definitely the most constrictive system of land tenure around this frontier. Its transition from a manorial type of system or agriculture towards a capitalist, market-oriented one was a spurious one. The capitalist type of system that they had was actually predicated on neo-Serb relations. This is my presentation today. Thank you very much.